In this video, we will take the local Next.js app and we will deploy it to Vercel through GitHub. So every commit, any future commit on every branch will result in a preview deployment, and any commit or merge on the master branch or main branch will result in the production deployment. Firstly, we need to make sure our changes are pushed to the GitHub. So I'm just typing the commands. You can of course commit all your changes using the git commit command, and when everything is done, git push will push everything to the GitHub. So our repo is up to date. All the code that is in GitHub is what we want to deploy to Vercel. But firstly, we need to import the project. Okay, so if this is the first time you're importing GitHub repo to Vercel, you will need to install the integration. Hopefully that is quite straightforward. Of course, I've done it before, so my screen looks a little bit different, but I believe it's just few clicks and you need to authorize Vercel to be able to access your repositories. Once you do that, you should be able to take the URL of the GitHub repo you want to import, paste it in, click continue, and depending what you selected, whether you enabled all your GitHub repos to be accessible by Vercel or not. In my case, I didn't. So in my case, I've only choose selected GitHub repos that can be imported to Vercel. So I need to go back to GitHub and change it. You can click on this link, or if you go to back to GitHub, go to settings, applications, click on the configure Vercel and scroll down. You'll see a list of repos. So you either have selected all repositories or only selected ones. So I'm adding the Next.js 101 ConvertKit to the list and hitting save. Okay, so once I do that, I'm able now to import it. Click continue, should give me the next screen without the error. And here we can change the name of the project. We can change the framework preset. We'll keep it on Next because we're working with Next app. The build and output settings are automatically pre-configured. And inside of the environment variables, we'll simply copy the variables from our local environmental variables. These are the ConvertKit form ID, API key, and API URL. And now we are able to click on the deploy, which will import the GitHub repo. It will run the build command, and then the output application will be deployed to a specific URL. Okay, so you'll find what the URL is once the deployment is completed. So let's wait for that a little bit. And there is one more issue that I forgot to do with the Tailwind CSS. We're not purging unused styles, so we'll fix it in a moment. For now, we just let the deployment to finish. Hopefully it will go successfully. And if it will be done successfully, then we should have the master branch deployed. And if you followed me from the start, you know that I was working in the recording branch. So the master branch is like the start branch, the starting files. That's why it's different than our local host. Okay, so here is the Next app. As I said, this is the master branch, just with the welcome screen. And here is the dashboard inside of Vercel, where you see the deployment URL and the domain name. Okay, so this is the two URLs. One is the deployment specific, and the other one is the full domain name or domain URL that will be always up to date with master. Now let's fix the issue with the unused CSS. If we inspect it in the network tab, you'll see that the CSS being downloaded just for this simple page is almost 300 kilobytes big. And the reason is because we haven't specified the purge option. If you go to the Next.js installation with Tailwind CSS, we need to specify purge option to remove all unused styles, only scan the pages directory and components directory, and only classes included in these components will be included in the final bundle. We will take it and paste it inside of our Tailwind config. Now only classes included in pages and components will be included in the final bundle. And the other thing I need to fix is I need to move the components folder inside of the src folder and not keep it inside of the pages. Okay, that was my mistake at the start. Update imports, we'll click on yes. And now we'll just validate that everything's working fine locally. Let's see if this works still as expected. Hopefully it does. And of course it doesn't, because some of the import statements are not up to date. So let's go to index. Components is now one directory up. Okay, so we'll need to include the 2 dots. We're going up from pages to components, so this should be fixed. And inside of components, we need to remove the 2 dots for the icons import, and here as well. Okay, so this should now fix it. And now we should have it running locally exactly the same as before. Everything works fine. Import statements are fixed. And here is the purge option. It should scan pages and components. And to test it, we can kill the build and run npm run build. This should take the new Tailwind config and should not give us any warning about unused CSS. And here is the final CSS, much smaller, 434 bytes, and no warning about unused CSS. Okay, so if I again remove this and keep it just the empty array and run the build command locally, you will see even locally the Tailwind is not purging unused CSS. So we have the same warning as we had it in Vercel console. So that's how you can validate it locally. The purging is working as well. And we of course will keep it as we want. Now we will add it to the commit. So git add everything. We'll commit the changes. And we'll push it to the GitHub repo. And this should, if we've configured everything correctly, it should kick in the build in Vercel and give us a preview of this deployment. So let's go back to Vercel dashboard. And we'll see a new build being kicked on the recording branch with our purge unused CSS. Okay, so that's the preview deployment in the progress. As I said, there are no warnings now about unused CSS. And once everything is deployed, here is the final small CSS and the deployment URL. Oops, actually, this is perfect example why the preview deployments are handy. You see our CSS is butchered, and you probably know why, because I did include the pages and components, but in our folder structure it is src. Okay, so src pages and src components. Okay, so that was my typo, but that's how handy these deployments, the preview deployments are. No one will see this URL unless you share it with them, so you can validate in the live environment how the page looks like after the deployment. It has this hash of the deployment itself, which means no one will see it, and the old page or the full page is still the old one, the master. Okay, so nothing is being broken for the user, but of course we know that we need to fix this. And as I said, the fix is simply fixing the path of the purging. And if we run it now locally, the CSS should be slightly bigger than before, but not as big as without the purging. Okay, so here it is. It's a little bit bigger, but that's what we want. And now I'll just commit it again. Okay, this will kick in a new deployment with the new changes again on the recording branch. And we should not see that issue anymore. Okay, so here it is. the new deployment, new URL, new hash, and once it's done, we should see a nice page with the form. Again, this is a perfect example how the preview deployments are useful. And here it is. Okay, so visit the page. It should work exactly the same way. So if I type in an email, everything should work all the way through the submission, through the confirmation of the email, because we've already specified the environmental variables for the ConvertKit implementation. So this is how the preview deployments work. And if we are happy with it, we can simply create a PR, merge the recording branch into the master, and that would update our main URL with the latest code. I'll do it quickly through the command line, through the GitHub command line CLI. So if you don't have it installed, it's really handy way to create PRs, manage PRs. So GHPR create will create the first pull request. We'll give it a title, final course files. Then we don't need to give it any body, and we hit submit. This created the first PR on this project. So GHPR list will show all the PRs if there is multiple. And this is just a quick command to create a PR instead of going to the GitHub and do it through the UI. So we've created a PR, and now we can validate whether this PR can be merged into master without any issues. And for that, we can simply type in GHPR checks, and it will take the latest PR we've created and give you this breakdown whether there's something failing, whether it's successful, or if it's pending. Here is the URL of the preview deployment. So let's validate it. Perfect. Everything works fine in this build, and we can merge this, and that's simply GHPR merge. We'll merge this PR, create a merge commit, delete the recording branch. I'm gonna select no, I'm gonna keep it locally. Now we've created merge commit onto the master. If we go back to Vercel, we should see a new build being built or being built on the master. When this is finished, we will see the live page deployed and ready to build. So the screenshot gets updated, and if I refresh the live page, we'll see the form there as well. So that's how we've successfully merged the recording branch into master, that then kicked in the production build and updated the final URL. Okay, so here it is, final project. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully now you know how to work with deployments inside of Vercel.